Hi folks, I'm Steve Butler. If you're like me, you've run out of storage places for all of your kids' toys. See how we turn this traditional design into a fun, playful, contemporary toy chest here in the garage. The beauty of this project is its simplicity. It's made up of tongue and groove boards, off-the-shelf lumber available at most home centers. The construction is a classic construction known as frame and panel, what you see in most doors. We have our stiles, our rails, and a floating panel. First thing we're going to do is cut our stiles and rails to length. Let's get started. This project isn't my design. I saw it in a woodworking book, but I made it my own by using the pine and groove lumber, off-the-shelf lumber. You know, we talk about economy in the show and stuff, and accessibility. So we took our lumber right off the shelf. We used tongue and groove lumber because I like the beads, the accents for the beads. And you know, half the work's done for us. There's tongue and grooves in here. We had to cut some tongue and grooves, but so we just did a little variation on a design that I saw in a book. The first thing we're going to do is cut our rails to length. We have 4 front and back rails, and we have 4 side rails. Just using my chop saw set up on the table saw, and I have a dead man to help hold up the boards. If you're cutting a lot of boards, a lot of multiples, you can set up a stop to help you greater accuracy, cutting them to length. Just using my pencil line, make a mark, show which side's my waist side, bring it over, cut it to size. All right, I'm just going to use the board I cut off as my measure. If we're off a little bit, it's not a great deal. All right, we have our 4 front and back rails cut at 35 inches. We're going to go ahead and cut our center rails to 10 3/4 inches. I wanted to make my young son something substantial that he could hold on to, so I used this design to make him his toy box. I wanted a little fun though, so we painted it some primary colors. We have chalkboard paint on the side so he can write on it, scribble on it, have a lot of fun. And what I did is I glued up the blocks. Trying to use the same color to spell his name, ripped them on the bandsaw and inlaid them in there just to make it fun. Before I cut these at 10 3/4, I'm just going to cut them to a little bit of more of a manageable length. I have an 8-foot board here, and it's a little awkward to work with sometimes in a small space, so I'm just going to cut it in half. And now we'll go ahead and measure and cut our small pieces at 10 3/4. You want to make sure you clear all the dust out. You want to keep this in square, and if it's not up against the fence, then it's going to throw the whole case out if it's out of square. So. You could do this on the table saw, but it's just another setup. It's just easy here. I have my chop saw set up. Slide them along and do it. All right, we have our rails cut. Let's go ahead and do the stiles. Frame and panel boxes are more of a British design, and that's why you'll see them a lot in the New England states and colonial states, is where they brought in their vernacular, what they were used to. All right, we're going to go ahead and cut our stiles at 21 3/4 inches. This is going to make up our side panels. All right, we need 8 of these. All right, last one. Want to make sure the saw comes to a complete stop before you take these boards out. All right, we have 2 center rails to cut at 10 3/4 as well. All right, we have all our stiles and rails cut to length. Now what we have to do is rip them down to width. All our material is 4 inches wide. And what we need is this groove to hold our panels, but we're going to trim off this tongue. We're going to do that over in the table saw. If you're unsure of the height, just the thickness of a pencil. Now we're just going to rip them. I don't need a push stick. It's wider than our fist. We're just going to cut all our stiles and rails to that width. All right, we have most of our rails cut at 4 inches wide with the exception of the top back rail. It's going to be cut at 3 7/8 wide. We're using a piano hinge to attach the lid, and it's an 8-inch thick. So we're just going to compensate by cutting an 1/8 inch off our rail. But essentially, these chests, as they're called, used for storage. It's basically an elaborate box with a lid on it. You can fancy it up and add a decorative molding at the top, or a plinth, a baseboard around it to fancy it up. There's 5 board chests just made out of 5 boards nailed together, but the bottom line, they were used for storage. All right, we have our rails cut the length, cut the width. Now we're going to go ahead and cut our stiles to width. I've reset the table saw to 4 inches. We're going to do our side and center stiles. With the frame and panel construction, we have our tongue and groove pieces. So our side pieces for our case good, we have the grooves. I'm going to cut a groove in these stiles, leave this tongue on, and that is how we're going to join these together to make up our frame. All right, our 4 remaining stiles, which are going to make up our frame pieces, I'm going to cut to 3 5/8 wide, but I'm going to leave the tongue on this time. Again, make sure you clean that out periodically. If you don't, your piece can butt up against that, giving you a false measurement. All right, we have all those stiles cut to 3 5/8. Now what we're going to do is change out the saw blades. We're going to use our stacked dado blades to create tenons on the end of these pieces, which is how we're going to join the whole frame together. All right, we're about to cut our tenons. What I've done, I've taken out my saw blade and I've attached a set of stacked dado blades. And what they do, they nestle together. You can put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them together to create a wider blade to make a larger cut in one single pass. That's how we're going to cut our tenons. Now our tenons need to be 3/8 of an inch long. And we're cutting tenons on the end of all of our center stiles and all of our rails on either end so that they fit into the existing grooves. Now I need a 3/8 long tenon, so I'm simply Gonna butt this right up to the edge of my fence here. I've attached a sacrificial wood fence to the original table saw fence. It's going to be a little lighter than 3/8 of an inch, which is perfect. It leaves some room for the glue when that cures. I have my miter gauge that I'm going to use to support my pieces. And we've lowered the blade, and we're just going to keep raising it incrementally and turning over our boards to create the tenons until we get the desired thickness. Oh, that's nice. That's perfect. That's what we're looking for. Now you can see how that's coming together. Our tenons fit nicely into the groove, and on the back side we have this nice chamfer or bevel. Like I said, we're using off-the-shelf lumber. That was already on there. Nice detail of the beads. There we go. Our panel will fit in that groove. Just going to go ahead and use the other. When you're putting your pieces up against your fence, make sure you do it back here. You can see that I have some cutouts, some markings. You want to make sure you're perfectly square, back away from the blade before you proceed with your cut. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and cut the ends, the tenons on all the rails. All right, that's it. We've got most of the joinery for this box cut right now. Now you notice, after I made my cut, I moved my piece along and slid it that back way. You don't want to bring it back over the blades. It's not going to do much, but it could cause some tear out. And you've just gone to a lot of work to make this nice, neat cut. Your speed, you just want a nice fluid motion. If you're too fast and too erratic, you're going to get more tear out, and you're just going to have more sanding and cleaning up to do. So just a nice, even flow. All right, now what I have to do, in the back of my front stiles, we have to cut a groove down the length of it to accommodate the tenon on our mating style. We have a male, we're going to create a female part, so that fits in nicely and joins up. You don't want to push down too hard, just keep this level. All right, there we have it. We have the width of our groove we need, the length of it or the depth of it, and you can see when we glue that together, it'll look like this edge. It's a nice decorative edge, one solid panel, 4 inches wide. That'll form one of the legs for the side of our toy chest. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and do that to the rest of the stiles. The Pennsylvania Dutch would paint quite elaborately their chests. There's some designs in the book there. Germanic folks would paint them, stencil them, and they're quite beautiful. We use ours as an extra seat in the house when we have company. Just pull the toy box over from the dining room where my son keeps it, and it's just for the overflow. People sit on it. Why spend money when you don't have to? I didn't want to go out and buy plywood for the panels. I had these boards lying around in my shop. Now they're a little thicker. If you notice, they don't quite fit in the groove. So I'm going to show you how to get around that. Earlier I cut all my panels to size, and then what I did, using my stacked dado blades, keeping them in there, I cut these channels or rabbet all around the edge, and I did it a ½ an inch away from the edge. And this is what's called a shaker panel. Actually, the shakers left their furniture unadorned. It's kind of like a raised panel, but by doing that, I then made it so that my panel fits nicely into the groove and leaves this little reveal. It's a nice decorative effect. This is going to be on the inside of the panel, or pardon me, inside of the chest, and that's how it'll look on the outside. Now, we have our stiles cut that are going to form our corner pieces, our legs. I'm going to go ahead and glue them together at 90 degrees. And then we're going to cut out a foot pattern. You could use whatever you want. I took a coffee can and just traced this. There's no pattern set in stone. You can cut it on an angle. Whatever works for you. This is your own project, so make it your own. All right, I went ahead and I cut my stock for the lid. Piece of plywood here. And I'm framing it with my 1x2 pine. I just mitered the ends. And how I'm going to join this on here, we're going to use what's called biscuit joints. Now essentially it's a mortise and tenon. Let me show you these. These ones I glued into the frame stock. You could do it either way. These ones I glued in to our lid panel. Now the nice thing is, when you put these in, the moisture in the glue makes them swell. So it creates a really nice lock joint. Now another thing I did, let me show you. We have a miter joint here. This is end grain against end grain. A really bad glue joint. It needs some reinforcement. You could use hardware. What I did, I cut a spline. And I cut one on this end as well. And what happens there, when we form that, you can see the miter with the groove in it. And we simply, I just cut these little pieces of 1/4-inch plywood. You could use solid wood, but you have to make sure the grain is running at a certain angle that it won't snap, that it's not weak. And when I cut both of them, I'll put glue in here. And there we have our spline joint. And that'll reinforce it. And then I'll just take a block plane, chisel, and knock that off. And how I cut those, I made a simple jig for the table saw. We're going to go ahead and cut one. Okay, so I have my piece that I want to cut my spline groove, and I'm just aiming for the middle. I have an 1/8-inch wide blade in there, just your regular saw blade, so I'm going to make 2 passes because we're using 1/4-inch stock for our splines. Now you can buy jigs, mail order catalogs, the woodworking shops, or you can make your own. I prefer to make my own. They're quick and easy. I spray lacquer them. I write the information down on it and I spray lacquer it so that it won't come off. I hang it up on the wall and I have it for another time. All right, let's do it. I want to make sure this is flush down until it bottoms out. Don't push too hard or you're going to break that corner of your nice 45. Okay? I have my safety glasses on. I'm doing a lot of talking, so I don't have a dust mask on. You can wear hearing protection, whatever. All right, start, make sure this is back away from the blade. I'm a big hockey fan, so I think of the goalie crease. Make sure it's past the goalie crease. Start your fence. There we go. Now that's an 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to move this over another 1/8 of an inch. Pardon me, a 1/16 of an inch. I want it at my 1 1/16 mark away from the blade. Do a second pass, and that should be great. There we go. That second pass created our 1/4-inch gap spline groove for the spline. Now you can see it's not centered. If you wanted that, you're concerned with that, it's just a matter of moving the fence over more. The important thing is that this one matches our mating piece. All right, let's go glue up our lid. We're going to turn this around. I'll show you why. Have my biscuit joiner, and we're just going to go to our layout lines. And you can see this has a layout line on the machine. And that's where we're going to now hold it down. Don't put your hand here. A lot of people put their hand here. Sometimes these skip, bite the wood, and jump. You don't want to make your hand a target. You know, just hold this down. That's why I have my clamps holding the lid down. And we're just going to push it in, go to the next one, go to the next one. All right, let's get started. I'm going to turn our frame piece around. Again, my marks are up. It's easy to get turned around, and then these won't align. And I'm going to use the plywood lid as my support, and just go ahead and do the same thing on our frame piece. All right, we'll just clean this up and we'll go ahead and glue that up. All right, we have our bead of glue on there. And I put it right along the frame. We're just going to set this in the grooves. They're a little snug, so, which is how they're supposed to be, but there we go. So, I'm just going to take our clamps. Now you want to make sure the clamping pressure is right in the center. If not, if it's off a little, see what's happening here? It'll pull that down or up. So this takes a little bit of finesse at first. Just tap that in to close up that gap there. Drive it home. Let that glue set. Close up that miter and help keep that flush. Perfect. We're just going to let that sit for about an hour, trim these off, and then we can install it later on our toy chest. All right, I went ahead and glued up our legs, and then I attached our stiles, our center rails, and our panels to make up the front and back pieces of our toy chest. So now we're just going to go ahead and glue our rails and our side panels together. We're good to go. Again, you want to make sure you have everything you might need, a mallet, glue, some cloths to wipe off the excess, and just take your time. It's easy to get turned around here. You want to make sure the groove, sounds pretty silly, but you want to make sure the groove is down for your panels. I have the chest elevated. Again, you don't need a ton of glue. You want to make sure there's glue in there. It's going to work and do its job. But if you have excess, you just have to spend more time cleaning up afterwards. So you just want a nice squeeze out, a nice bead of glue coming out there. And I'm just going to put this up flush right up here. Slide that in. And once we have the other piece on, clamping it, we'll make sure those corners are nice and square. All right, you can slide this in now or after. Want to make sure my grain pattern is going the same direction as the front and back pieces. And we're just going to fit that in and slide that up. Now, you don't have to go crazy and work too fast, but the glue does set up pretty quickly. So that's why we want to make sure we have everything around us in case something goes wrong that we need. Take apart, a mallet, hammer. Nice. So there we go. That looks good. I'm just going to put some glue now on these tenons. We're going to set the other piece in and glue it together and clamp it together. You can see how this is angled. I'm just going to put some 90-degree blocks I have. Once it's set up, clamp them on, and that'll help keep it square. Nice. A little bit of squeeze out. We know the glue's doing its job. Just going to wipe off some of the excess in here. Like that. This is coming along nice. One of the challenges is obviously the size. We're working in a smaller shop by ourselves, so it can get a little cumbersome. So you have to be resourceful. And that's why we glued up in stages. You know, we glued up our corner pieces that made up our post, our legs, our feet. We glued up the front and back panels first. So we just did it in stages. And then finally our side pieces last. Then it's a little more easier to maneuver with glue ups and space. You don't have all these clamps all over the place, and it's just hard to maneuver in the shop. All right, the next thing we have to do are attach our cleats that are going to hold our floorboards. Now, I love saving my offcuts, and here's a great example. These are the pieces cut off from our tongue and groove boards. You can see the tongue there. What I did is I just went to the table saw, trimmed off that tongue. So all that is left is the bead. And you know, it's in the details. I know no one's really going to see this, but if for some reason you turn the box over, there's the nice board with the bead on it. So we're just going to go ahead, countersink, and drill our screw holes. There we go. I've got my countersink bit in there. That's nice. Just go ahead and do it to the rest of them and attach them. All right, I went ahead and drilled the holes and installed our cleats for the floorboards. Just going to finish up with the last one. Again, attention to details. That looks really nice. Off-the-shelf lumber. Perfect. There we go. That looks great. We're now going to turn this over, install our floorboards, just shoot some brad nails in there. There, we're done. All right, we flipped the box over on our sawhorses. We're just going to go ahead and install our floorboards. I cut them to size and length earlier. Now, these are boards that I salvaged from a pallet that was sitting outside. So they're little random widths, and you know, we're just going to lay them out. That's great. Look at that. That looks beautiful. Salvage wood. Perfect. Now we're just going to move the box back to the bench and attach our lid. Something to think about here. We're using brass screws, soft metal. It's easy to strip the heads off the screws. So I just dip them in a little bit of wax. This is just flooring, paste wax. You can buy it at any home center really cheap. There we go. A lot of times if you don't use it, you'll strip the heads right off of these brass screws. Very easy to do. So I'm just going to line this up, stick one on either end and in the center, and then go ahead and do the rest of them. Last but not least, all right, that looks great. That worked out really well. All that's left to do is install some lid hardware. You don't want this to come crashing down on somebody. Anyways, there you go. Off-the-shelf lumber. All that's left to do is sand this and finish this. I think I'm just going to put on a coat of varnish, Durethane, leave this natural. Looks great. All right, as usual, I had a great time building this project. I hope you'll come and see us again here in the garage. Hey, I almost forgot. Like us on Facebook and check out our website at thegaragewithstevebutler.com.
Just wanted to let you know I'm doing just fine. But hey, I'm doing fine out here on the road. As long as I have friends to call, I'm never alone. Folks wonder how I take all that driving all the time. As long as I have friends to call, I'm doing just fine. Said, hey, did I wake you?
Am I in the shop? Do you see me?
Move. No.
You